Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? The sound of tires on the wet asphalt echoed through the empty highway. The rain had started hours ago, and it wasn't letting up. The headlights of my car cut through the thick, misty night, barely illuminating the road ahead. It was just me and the dark, endless stretch of highway. The kind of road where you could easily lose yourself, where silence was thick enough to swallow your thoughts whole. I thought I was alone, but I was wrong. It all started when I picked up my phone. My hands trembled as I glanced at the screen. There was a new message, a strange one. It's been a while. I'm still waiting for you. You should turn around. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't supposed to be getting messages. I hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. No one knew where I was. The message wasn't from anyone I recognized. Yet somehow I felt an unease creep up my spine, like something was watching me from the darkness just beyond my headlights. I wanted to ignore it. I should have. But curiosity gnawed at me like a slow, burning itch. I typed a quick response, fingers shaking. Who is this? There was no immediate reply. And for a moment, I thought maybe it had been a wrong number or some prank. I almost convinced myself to forget about it, to let the night roll on in its quiet, monotonous way. But the next ping shattered that fragile peace. You're not as clever as you think. Turn around now? This wasn't a prank. It couldn't be. My mind raced, trying to find logic in the situation. I had been on this road for hours, heading toward a town I had never seen before. The one place I hoped would provide some relief from the haunting memories I left behind. But now I wasn't sure if I was being followed, or if I had always been followed. I wiped my hand across my face, trying to clear the fog that had settled in my brain. My heart thudded in my chest as I glanced in the rearview mirror. The darkness was thick, swallowing any reflection. Just the road behind me stretched out into the void, as it had been for the past several miles. I glanced at my phone again. My fingers were trembling, but this time I didn't type a response. Instead, I turned the volume up, hoping the sound of the radio would drown out the paranoia that was beginning to creep into my thoughts. But the message didn't stop. Turn around. I cursed under my breath. The sense of dread was crawling up my neck, making the hairs stand on end. The last time I felt this, unsettled. Something terrible happened. I could still hear the sound of that night echoing in my mind. I had tried to leave it all behind, everything. The people, the fear, the chaos. I had thought I could outrun it, but there were things you could never escape. Things that followed. Things that waited. And now it seemed one of them was calling me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes darting around the empty road, desperate for something familiar to pull me from the edge. But it wasn't there. I was alone. Or so I thought. Another ping on my phone. I'm right behind you. I slammed my foot on the gas, the car surging forward. Tires spinning on the slick asphalt as I tried to push the fear down. Who was this? How did they know where I was? I couldn't help but look again, despite knowing I shouldn't. The darkness outside seemed to pulse, like the air itself was alive with something waiting for me to slip up. And then, I saw it. A shadow in the rearview mirror, just for a split second. No, it couldn't be. I blinked. Rubbed my eyes, but the shadow didn't disappear. It was still there, growing larger. There was someone behind me. My breathing hitched, and I swerved the car to the side of the road. My fingers fumbled to grab the door handle, but just before I opened it, something caught my eye. A figure standing in the distance at the edge of the highway. My mind raced with the possibility, but I quickly shut down the thought. No one would be out here at this hour, and yet the figure was there, impossibly still, its outline hidden in the dark. I slammed the car door shut, locking it, but my breath came in uneven bursts. I couldn't just keep driving. I couldn't ignore this. Forcing myself to look away from the figure, I glanced back at my phone, the screen flickering with the same message, only now it had changed. I see you. It's too late to run now. A chill ran through me. I gripped the steering wheel again, white-knuckled, and then nothing. No more messages, no more sounds. It was quiet. Too quiet. I glanced once more in the rearview mirror, my eyes darting to catch a glimpse of the road behind me. The shadow was gone, but I wasn't alone. The figure was now standing on the side of the road, closer, far too close. The road stretched ahead of me, yet I felt the overwhelming urge to look back again. And I did. That's when I saw it. A car. It was black, dark, like it had been painted with the night itself. The headlights were off, and the shape of the car was barely visible in the dark. It was parked on the shoulder of the road, and somehow I didn't remember seeing it there before. How long had it been there? I couldn't explain it, but that car felt like the epicenter of something wrong. Something off. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. My grip tightened around the wheel as I slowly pressed the gas pedal again. The sound of the engine hummed, and I felt myself slowly start to move forward. But then, another ping. You shouldn't have looked back. I froze. The message felt like a jolt of electricity rushing through my entire body. Who was doing this? How could they possibly know my every move? My eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror. The car was following me now, not in the distance, not far behind. It was right there, just feet away, its headlights glaring through the mist. The distance between us was closing too fast, and I knew, deep down, I knew, it wasn't just a coincidence. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and for a split second, I saw something else in the reflection of my mirror. A face. It was a blur, a shadow, but it was there. A figure so close it almost felt like they were right behind me. Before I could react, the black car honked. The sound ripped through the silence, sharp and urgent. I looked ahead at the road, but my mind was already spinning. I had to get away, but where? There was nowhere to run on this empty highway. Suddenly, the black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing a figure sitting inside. I couldn't make out their features, but I could feel their eyes on me, watching me. And then, before I could react, the figure raised their hand and pointed toward something ahead. I didn't know what it was at first, but I soon saw it. The road was blocked. A long line of cars sat in the middle of the highway, abandoned. Some were overturned. Others were just sitting there, windows shattered, doors ajar. I stared at the scene, my heart hammering in my chest. How had I not seen this coming? Then, the figure in the black car did something strange. They smiled. The kind of smile you give someone when you know they've made the biggest mistake of their life. And that's when I realized everything I had thought was leading me down a road to safety was only bringing me closer to the end. I should have known better than to believe it was all over. That feeling in my gut, the one that had gnawed at me the night I left the highway behind. It never truly left. I could still hear the gravel crunching under my tires, the twisted trees looming in the rearview mirror, and that sound, the one that had echoed through the air like an old, distorted record playing in the dead of night. It haunted me. I tried to tell myself it was just the lingering effects of fear, something the mind conjures up after experiencing something so bizarre, so inexplicable. But when the dream started, when I woke up in a cold sweat, my breath ragged and my heart pounding in my chest, I couldn't pretend anymore. Something had followed me. Something had crossed that boundary between what I knew to be real and what I was beginning to fear was real. The dreams were always the same. I was driving along that godforsaken highway, the trees leaning inward as if trying to choke out the light. The road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, curving in unnatural ways. No matter how fast I drove, the end never came. And always, I could hear it. A voice, a whisper barely audible, but insistent. It felt like it was inside my head, pressing against my skull, and in the distance, always at the edge of my vision. I could see something watching me, something that wasn't human. I woke up one morning, the sky just beginning to lighten, and the feeling hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't over. I wasn't safe. It was out there, still watching, waiting. I didn't know if it had followed me, if it had somehow found a way into my life beyond the highway, or if it was still back there, lurking in the shadows. But I couldn't shake the certainty that it wasn't finished with me. I spent days trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, that the experience was over and I needed to move on with my life. But the dreams persisted, each one more vivid than the last, each one more suffocating. I tried to forget, but to push it all away, but the feeling of being watched never faded. It was like a constant presence, a cold breath on the back of my neck, always just out of sight. I thought I could escape it. I moved to a new town, a fresh start. It was a small place, quiet and peaceful, far away from the memory of that night. But even here, in the calm, the dread still clung to me. I couldn't shake it, no matter how hard I tried. It wasn't until the night I found the letter that I knew something was wrong. It was addressed to me, but there was no return address. No name, no indication of who had sent it. Just my name, scrawled in thick black ink, almost as if it had been written in haste. I remember the way my hands trembled as I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly in half. I unfolded it carefully, my heart thudding in my chest. The words were typed, neat and cold. You can't escape it. It's coming for you. You shouldn't have left. The chill that ran down my spine was immediate, the blood in my veins turning to ice. Who could have known? How could anyone have known about the highway? About what happened there? I had told no one. I had kept everything to myself, certain that no one would believe me if I tried to explain. But whoever had sent this letter knew. They knew what had happened. They knew what I had seen, and they knew I couldn't escape it. The next few days were a blur. I tried to go about my life, to act like everything was normal, but the fear gnawed at me like a wild animal. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards in the dead of night, every knock at the door made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. And then it happened. One night, a week after I received the letter, I woke to a sound, soft at first, a tap, 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 like fingers on glass. I froze, my blood running cold. It was coming from the window, hesitantly. I pulled myself out of bed and crept toward it, my footsteps muffled against the carpet. I reached for the curtains and slowly pulled them back. There was nothing, just the empty street, bathed in moonlight. The same peaceful, quiet street that had seemed like a sanctuary just days before. But then I saw it, out of the corner of my eye, a shape, dark, elongated, like a shadow that had no place being there. It was standing on the far edge of my lawn, near the trees. And even though it was far away, I could feel it. The weight of its gaze, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on me. I slammed the curtains shut, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced. Could it be the same thing? Had it followed me here? Or was it something new? I spent the rest of the night in a daze, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But as the hours dragged on, nothing did. The shadows remained still. The air was quiet, as though the world outside had suspended its movement. And then, just before dawn, I heard it. A whisper, soft and thin, like the wind brushing against the trees. But I knew better. I knew the truth now. I wasn't just hearing things. It was real. It's time to come back. The words hung in the air, chilling me to my core. I didn't know what it meant, but I understood. Something was coming for me, something I couldn't outrun. and no matter where I went, no matter how far I traveled, it would always be there, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. And as the days dragged on, I realized one painful truth: I couldn't escape it. Whatever had been chasing me, whatever I had seen on that highway, was not something that could be outrun. It was far worse than I had ever imagined, and now it was coming for me again. I had to go back to the highway, back to face whatever had been following me all this time. But there was no way I could prepare myself for what I would find when I returned. I tried to put it off. I told myself I could keep running, that I could find a way to outrun the past. I even thought about leaving the country, starting fresh somewhere far, far away. But deep down, I knew there was no escaping it. The thing that had followed me, the thing I had felt lurking in the shadows, wasn't bound by geography or distance. It was tied to me in ways I couldn't understand, and no matter where I went, it would find me. The worst part was that I didn't even know what was. I hadn't seen it fully. Not once. I had caught glimpses, shadows in the corner of my eye, distorted figures in the distance. But I hadn't dared to confront it, to look it in the face. I had hoped that if I ignored it long enough it would fade, but I was fooling myself. It was always there, pressing against the edges of my reality like an infection. I didn't know how to begin preparing myself for what lay ahead, but the first step, I knew, was to return to that cursed highway. I couldn't outrun it, but maybe, just maybe, I could end this nightmare. I drove back in the dead of night. I couldn't bear the thought of daylight, of the normal world seeing me as I was now, broken, fractured, a shell of the person I once was. So, I drove as the moon hung low in the sky, the headlights of my car the only illumination in the oppressive darkness. The road seemed just as I remembered it, the same twisted curves, the same eerie silence, the same oppressive weight pressing against me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was waiting for me just beyond the range of the headlights. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I approached the place where it all began. The trees. The dense, choking forest that had surrounded me that night now seemed even more menacing, more suffocating. I could feel the air growing heavier, thicker with each passing second. As I drove deeper into the woods, my heart began to race. I didn't know what I was looking for, what I expected to find. All I knew was that I had to face whatever was waiting here. And then I saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, some strange shadow cast by the trees. But no, this was no illusion. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as I came to a stop just a few feet away from it. It was a person. At least, it looked like a person. Tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to reflect the darkness itself. Its skin was pale, sickly, stretched tight across the bones. But what made my blood run cold was the smile. It was wide, too wide, as if its face had been pulled into an unnatural grin. And its eyes, God, those eyes. They were empty, like a void, black and endless. I stared at it, frozen, unable to move, unable to even scream. My mind was screaming at me to drive away, to get out of there, but my body refused to cooperate. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to breathe. It just stood there, watching me, waiting. "You shouldn't have left," it whispered, its voice a raspy, distorted version of my own thoughts. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the car lurching forward as I sped away. I didn't look back, not once. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly, my vision blurred with tears, and my heart thudded in my chest like a drum. I didn't stop until I was miles away, the town behind me, the woods fading into the rearview mirror. I thought that was it. I thought I had outrun it again, but I was wrong. It was only the beginning. When I got home, the letter was waiting for me again. It had been left on my doorstep. sitting there like it had always been part of the landscape, part of the world I couldn't escape. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. It was the same as the first no return address, no name, just my name scrawled in that same frantic black ink. This time, I didn't wait. I tore it open without hesitation, as though the words inside would somehow change everything. It's not over. Come back. You're not safe yet. You can never leave. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking violently. It was all I could do to stop myself from running away again. To not get in my car and drive as far as I could, as fast as I could. But I knew better now. I knew that running wasn't going to help. The voice from the woods, the voice from the figure. It wasn't just an idle threat. It was a warning. It was a promise. I had made a mistake in thinking that leaving would end it. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew this much: I would have to go back. Again. But this time, I wouldn't be going alone. This time, I'd take someone with me. There was a darkness out there. Something that could never be outrun. Something that could never be escaped. And it was waiting for me. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next. The drive felt different this time. I wasn't alone in my car. Beside me sat Thomas, my oldest friend. He didn't believe me at first when I told him about everything. The whispers, the figures, the nightmarish things that haunted me. He'd been skeptical, chalking it up to stress or some kind of mental break. But that was before the letter arrived at his place too. I remember the look on his face when he showed me the letter. He hadn't even said a word. His face told me everything I needed to know. The same name, the same chilling message, the same promise that we would never escape it. So, when I called him up, he didn't hesitate. He knew deep down that something was very wrong. That the normal world was slipping away from us, replaced by something darker, more insidious. And now, he was sitting next to me, clutching his seatbelt with a white, knuckled grip, eyes scanning the shadows outside. "Do you think we'll make it this time?" he asked quietly, his voice tight with uncertainty. I couldn't answer him. I didn't know if we would make it. All I knew was that we had no choice but to try. The figure, the one I had seen standing on the side of the road, its eyes so hollow, so dark, it had left me shaken, but it had also lit a fire in me. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let it win. Thomas glanced over at me, his brow furrowed. "You've been here before, haven't you? This is where it all started." I nodded, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Yes, this is the place where it began. But I don't think we're going to find answers here." He frowned. "Then why come back?" I didn't have an answer for him, not one that would make sense. We were driving back into the heart of whatever nightmare had latched onto me, into the darkened woods and twisted highway. I could feel it, the air growing thicker as we approached. Pressing against the windows, the weight of it suffocating. As we neared the spot where I had seen the figure before, I slowed the car down, my senses heightened. The road was eerily quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, no rustle of wind in the trees. It felt as though the entire world had gone still, holding its breath. "Stop," Thomas said, his voice tense. "Stop the car." I complied, the car rolling to a halt. We sat in silence for a long moment, neither of us daring to speak. The moonlight cast long shadows, stretching over the twisted trees that surrounded us on all sides. For a moment, I wondered if we had made a mistake. Maybe this was the wrong thing to do. Maybe we should have turned around, left this place behind for good. But then I heard it. A rustling sound, faint at first, but growing louder. It came from the woods, from beyond the reach of the headlights. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Thomas nodded, his face pale. "Yeah. What the hell is that?" The sound continued, growing more distinct, like something, or someone, moving through the underbrush. I gripped the door handle ready to bolt, but then I saw it. A figure. A silhouette standing just beyond the tree line. Its outline barely visible in the darkness. It was watching us. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my chest, a drumbeat of panic. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, staring. "Who the hell is that?" Thomas hissed, his voice barely audible. "Is that the same thing from before?" I didn't know. I couldn't say. But it felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. The figure remained motionless, its gaze never leaving us. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run, to drive away as fast as I could. But I couldn't. Something held me in place, like I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Then, the figure took a step forward. Slowly, deliberately. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding through the shadows as if it were part of them. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I reached for the ignition, my hand trembling as I fumbled for the keys. But before I could start the car, the figure spoke. "You've come back." The voice was a rasping, distorted echo of my own thoughts, just like before. But this time, it was different. It was closer, more insistent, more real. "You think you can leave?" It continued, its words sinking into my skin, burrowing deep into my chest. "You think you can outrun it?" I shuddered, fear coursing through me like ice water. "What are you?" I found my voice at last, though it sounded small. Weak, barely a whisper against the oppressive silence. The figure took another step forward, and suddenly, the air grew colder, the shadows darker. "I am what follows," it said. "I am the thing that never leaves, and neither will you." Thomas grabbed my arm, his grip tight, pulling me toward the car. "We need to go now. This isn't real. It can't be." But I wasn't sure anymore. My heart pounded in my ears, and the world around me seemed to distort, as if reality itself was being warped by the presence of whatever this was. The figure was too close now. I could see its face, or at least, I thought I could. Its features were so distorted, so twisted that they almost didn't make sense. A face like a mask, stretched too thin, its eyes wide and black, its mouth still contorted into that wide, unnatural grin. Then, in the blink of an eye, it vanished. Gone. Just like that. The only thing left was the overwhelming silence. No rustling, no sound, just the echo of my own ragged breathing. "What the hell was that?" Thomas said, his voice hoarse, still in shock. He kept his eyes on the spot where the figure had stood, but there was nothing there. I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure I ever would. But one thing was certain, it wasn't over. It was never over. And as we drove away, the letter in my bag felt heavier, the words inside it echoing in my mind. I had come back, but it hadn't let go. It was still following. And no matter where I went, I knew it would always be there, lurking, waiting. We were in this together now, and we weren't getting out of this. Not alive. Not ever. We didn't speak much after that. The drive back to town felt endless, like the road stretched on forever, winding through the same dark, oppressive woods that had swallowed us whole. The air inside the car was thick with tension, our every breath heavy with fear and uncertainty. The silence between us was suffocating, as though every word we spoke would be one too many. I kept glancing at Thomas, watching him as he stared out the window, his face pale and set. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, maybe he had. The way he gripped the seatbelt, the tension in his shoulders. It was like he was holding himself together, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't blame him. I was doing the same. "Do you think we're the only ones?" Thomas asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror, then back to the road. "Do you think we're the only ones this is happening to? People don't just disappear like that. There has to be more." I didn't want to entertain the thought. I didn't want to think about how many other people, had been caught up in whatever nightmare had begun that night. But the truth was, I didn't have an answer. And part of me didn't want to know. But the longer we drove, the more it gnawed at me. The more I thought about it. There had to be others. People who had seen things. Who had felt it. The creeping dread, the whispers in the night, the things that followed them even after they left. And what about the letter? The fact that it had shown up at Thomas's place, just like it had at mine. That couldn't be a coincidence. The thing that had been hunting me, that had followed me home, had found him too. It wasn't just some figment of my imagination. It was real. It was happening to us both. Why didn't it kill us? Thomas asked, his voice barely a whisper. I blinked, the question catching me off guard. What do you mean? He looked over at me, his face pale and grim. The figure, it had us. We were right there, face to face. It could have done whatever it wanted, but it didn't. It let us go. I thought about it for a moment. It was true. The figure had been close enough to touch, close enough to drag us into whatever hell it came from. But it hadn't. Instead, it had just disappeared, as if it had grown bored of us. Or maybe it had something else in mind. I don't know. I admitted, my voice tight. Maybe it's not ready yet. The idea of being part of some twisted game, caught in a cycle of torment that had no end, filled me with dread. I wasn't sure how much more I could take, but the answer was clear. We weren't safe. Not by a long shot. As we passed the outskirts of town, I glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. We were both exhausted, physically and mentally. But the weight of everything that had happened made it impossible to rest. I could feel my mind racing, replaying the events over and over, trying to make sense of what we had seen. Then, a thought hit me. What if we're not meant to escape? I said, more to myself than to Thomas. He turned to look at me. What? What if this thing, whatever it is, doesn't want us to leave? I continued. What if we're part of something bigger? Something we don't understand? Thomas frowned, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. That's a hell of a thought. But it wasn't just a thought. It was the truth. I could feel it deep inside me, that gnawing sense of inevitability. Whatever we had stumbled into, whatever was following us, it wasn't something we could outrun. It was part of us now. And it wasn't finished with us. We pulled into my driveway, and the weight of the night seemed to settle even more heavily on my shoulders. The house loomed in front of me, dark and quiet, as though nothing had happened. The familiar sight of my home should have been comforting, but now it felt like a trap, a cage that I couldn't escape. I turned off the car, but neither of us moved. I could feel Thomas's eyes on me, waiting for something. Maybe for me to say something, to make it all feel less real. But I couldn't. Do you think we should go inside? He asked, his voice breaking the silence. I glanced at the front door, then back at him. It was a strange question. We had no choice but to go inside. But the idea of being alone in that house again, of being alone with whatever had followed me, sent a shiver down my spine. There was no safety anywhere anymore. I don't know, I said, my voice distant. But we have to. We both got out of the car and stood there for a moment, facing the house. The moonlight cast long shadows across the lawn, making everything seem even darker, more foreboding. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe for the figure to appear again, to drag us back into the woods, to finish whatever it had started. But nothing happened. The house was silent. We walked inside. The moment the door shut behind us, a cold draft filled the room. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of something watching us. I could feel it, that same sensation from before. The prickling at the back of my neck, the feeling of being observed, of being hunted. And then I saw it. The letter. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, the same one that had been delivered to Thomas's place. Its envelope was slightly crumpled, as though someone had handled it recently. My breath caught in my throat as I moved toward it, but I wasn't the one who reached for it. Thomas's hand shot out faster than I expected. He snatched the letter up and tore it open in one swift motion, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the paper inside. "Is it the same?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the words on the page. His eyes widened, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. And then he spoke, his voice trembling. "It's different this time." I felt my heart drop. "What does it say?" I demanded, my voice rising. He looked at me, his face pale as death. "It says, you can't escape. You never will." The air seemed to freeze, and I realized whatever had been following us, whatever had haunted me, had now turned its attention to both of us. And there was no escaping it. Not now. Not ever. We were trapped. The air inside the house grew colder, almost suffocating. It felt as if the walls themselves were closing in, the darkness growing thicker with every passing second. Thomas held the letter in his hands, his fingers twitching like he couldn't decide whether to rip it to shreds or burn it, but he did neither. Instead, he stared at it as if the words were carved into his soul. "You saw this too, right?" I asked, my voice tight with dread. "This thing, this whatever it is. It's not just after me anymore, is it?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He just shook his head, his face pale. His eyes were distant, lost somewhere in the vast abyss of his mind. I could see the fear on him, raw and unfiltered. It was the same fear I felt creeping up my spine, knotting in my gut. I stepped closer to him, my feet dragging like they were weighted down by something invisible. "Thomas, what the hell is going on?" He didn't look at me. Instead, he started backing away slowly, his hands still clutching the letter. His gaze flickered from the paper to the shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the room. "I don't know," he whispered. "But it's not over. Not yet." The words hung in the air, cold and suffocating, as if they'd been placed there intentionally by whatever was lurking in the dark corners of the house. I didn't want to believe him, but I couldn't deny it either. The evidence was in front of me. The letter, the eerie feeling that something, or someone, was watching us, the oppressive silence that filled the house like a living thing. It was all too real. "What do you mean, not over?" I asked, forcing the words out even though I already had a sickening feeling of what he meant. "What's going to happen next?" His eyes met mine then, and for the first time, I saw true panic in his gaze. "I think it's just beginning." I didn't know how to process that. My mind was reeling, trying to grasp what we were dealing with. I had always believed in the mundane, in logic, in the safety of routines. But the night we spent in the woods, the things we had seen, the sensation of being hunted, it shattered everything I thought I knew. "What are we supposed to do?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. "Just wait until it comes for us." Thomas shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But I don't think we have a choice." That was the thing. We didn't have a choice. Whatever this thing was, it had already chosen us. The question wasn't if it was going to come for us. It was when. I stood there in the cold kitchen as the seconds ticked by, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The fear was like a thick fog, choking off any semblance of rational thought. There was no way out of this. No way to undo what had been set into motion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But where would I go? Who could help us? We were on our own. A soft thud broke the silence. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, the creak of the floorboards or the wind rattling the windows. But then I heard it again. This time louder, more deliberate. Thomas stiffened. He dropped the letter on the counter and turned, his face a mask of terror. What was that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was hammering in my chest, the sound deafening in my ears as I strained to listen. There it was again, a soft, slow thud followed by a dragging sound. It was coming from upstairs. Thomas took a hesitant step back. I don't want to go up there. I didn't either. But I knew we had no choice. We had to face whatever was waiting for us. I grabbed a nearby knife from the counter, my fingers cold against the handle, the metal heavy in my hand. It was a useless weapon against whatever we were dealing with, but it gave me a false sense of control. Something to hold on to, at least stay close. I muttered, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to comfort him or myself. We moved toward the stairs, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Each step felt like it took an eternity, the creaking of the wooden stairs loud in the silence. The thud and drag came again. This time, it was followed by a low, rasping noise. A sound that wasn't quite human. It made my blood run cold. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was pitch black. The only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through the window at the end of the hall. We both stood there for a moment, staring into the darkness, our breath caught in our throats. Should we turn on the lights? Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible. I shook my head. No, it might know. We need to move quietly. I didn't know what I was thinking. But I was certain of one thing. Whatever was upstairs didn't belong here. It wasn't part of the world we knew. We moved down the hallway, the air growing colder with each step. The dragging sound grew louder, closer. It was almost like it was waiting for us. I turned the corner, my heart in my throat, and froze. There, in the middle of the hallway, was a figure. It wasn't quite human, too tall, too angular, its limbs too long and unnaturally bent. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel its eyes on us, cold and empty, like it was studying us, weighing us. Thomas gasped, his breath catching in his throat, but I couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about the figure, something that kept me rooted in place, unable to move, unable to breathe. The thing tilted its head slightly, and then it spoke. I see you. The voice was like 1,000 whispers, all coming together in one guttural, rasping sound that scraped against my nerves. It wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, a thing that had crawled out from the very depths of fear itself. I could feel its cold breath on my skin, and for a moment, I thought I would suffocate under its weight. But then, the figure did something that made my blood run even colder. It smiled, a twisted, cruel smile that stretched too wide, too far for any human to make. Its teeth were jagged, like shards of glass, and they gleamed in the dim light. The smile didn't reach its eyes. Its eyes, those empty, void-like pits, remained cold, watching us. You can't escape, it hissed. And just like that, it lunged. The world exploded into motion. I barely had time to react before the figure lunged at us, its limbs stretching unnaturally, its mouth opening wide like some grotesque, gaping maw. The air crackled with a strange energy, thick with the stench of decay and something far darker. My heart skipped a beat, then hammered in my chest like a drum of impending doom. I shoved Thomas to the side, throwing myself against the wall to avoid the creature's outstretched hand. My breath came in short, panicked gasps, my mind a whirl of primal instinct and terror. The thing's fingers scraped across the wood of the wall, leaving deep gouges like the marks of claws. "Run!" I shouted, though I wasn't sure if I was telling Thomas or myself. I grabbed him by the arm, pulling him down the hallway, the sound of the creature's footsteps like a thunderstorm behind us. Every footfall was a death knell, each step closer to our end. The house seemed to close in around us, the walls narrowing, the darkness thickening. There was no escape. We reached the stairs, and I could hear the thing, its breath ragged and uneven, like it was savoring the hunt, growing closer. We were trapped. The stairs led down into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the hallway behind us. I turned to Thomas, desperation flooding my senses. "We can't go back. We can't go upstairs. We have to get out. He nodded, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear, but there was something else there too. Something more than just terror. There was the glimmer of understanding. We knew, both of us, that this wasn't just a nightmare. This wasn't something we could outrun. We were in the belly of the beast, and it had no intention of letting us go. With a breathless curse, I grabbed his wrist again and pulled him toward the front door. The handle was cold, slick with sweat, as I twisted it, throwing my weight against it. It wouldn't budge. What the hell? I yanked harder, my mind racing, the panic clawing at my throat. Why won't it open? Thomas grabbed my shoulder, forcing me to stop. His voice was quiet but insistent. It's locked. From the inside. I turned to look at him, blinking in confusion. What do you mean, locked from the inside? Who would lock us in? Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly to the kitchen, pulling open drawers and rummaging through them with frantic energy. The sound of his movements seemed deafening in the silence that followed the creature's pursuit. I didn't have time to question his actions. I was too aware of the cold that had begun to seep into my bones, too aware of the scraping sound that now echoed through the walls. The thing was still coming. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something. A glimmer of silver. It was a knife, gleaming under the dim light from the overhead lamp. I grabbed it before Thomas could stop me, my hand closing around the cold, heavy steel. It didn't feel like enough, not even close. But it was all I had. I turned back to the door, every instinct screaming at me to escape, to run, to get out of this house. But the lock, a heavy brass thing, was something beyond my knowledge. There was no way to pick it, no way to break it open. You can't leave. Thomas muttered behind me, his voice distant. Not yet. I looked back at him, confusion clouding my mind. What the hell do you mean, not yet? Thomas swallowed hard, stepping back toward me, his eyes wide with something unnameable. Fear, yes, but also something darker, something colder. It's too late for that. I felt my heart lurch in my chest as I turned slowly, the knife still clenched tightly in my hand. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. What are you talking about? His eyes darted to the window, his breath coming in shallow gasps, before he looked back at me, his face twisted with a sorrowful understanding. I don't think we're supposed to leave. Not now. Not after what we've seen. I shook my head. No. We can't just sit here and wait for it to. The sound of scraping, dragging footsteps cut me off, louder now closer. The walls seemed to pulse with every movement, every sound, like the house itself was alive, an unwilling participant in this nightmare. Before I could react, a cold, familiar pressure pressed against my chest. A sense of dread, a deep, knowing fear, settled over me like a blanket. I turned to the window and froze. The thing was there, not just at the door, but outside too. It stood beneath the window, its shape impossibly tall and contorted, its face obscured by darkness. It felt like it was watching us from both sides of the glass, its presence like a vise around my heart, tightening with every passing second. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it wanted. But I knew one thing. It was not alone. In the corner of my vision, I saw something else shift in the darkness. A figure, barely visible, lurking in the shadows just beyond the reach of the flickering light. And another, and another. It was like they were closing in. Thomas, I whispered, my voice barely audible. What's happening? What is this? His eyes were wide, filled with a kind of horror that seemed to swallow him whole. We shouldn't have come here, he murmured, his words low and broken. We should have never come back. The air was thick with the weight of those words, the oppressive silence settling over us as the creatures outside began to move. The darkness seeping into every corner of the house. We were trapped. We were surrounded, and we were about to become part of whatever nightmare had come to claim us. Do you feel it? I asked, my breath catching in my throat. The air, it's wrong. Like something's inside of us. Thomas nodded slowly. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. It's already too late. The creatures outside were not the only threat. The house itself was beginning to betray us, its old. Creaking bones groaning as though it had become something else. Something aware of our presence. Something alive in a way that no house should be. Every shadow seemed to twist unnaturally. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickening, rhythmic throb. The air was thick, charged with an oppressive energy that pressed in from every side, suffocating me with each breath I tried to take. My vision blurred, my mind scrambled as I struggled to make sense of the madness surrounding us. Thomas, his hands trembling, backed away from the window, his eyes darting to the darkened hallway beyond. His lips parted, but no words came out. It was as if he were trying to keep something in, something too terrifying to voice aloud. Thomas, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What the hell is happening? What is this thing, this place? His gaze shifted, meeting mine for the briefest of moments before he looked away again. The fear on his face was palpable, but there was something else buried deep beneath it, a deep understanding that chilled me to the core. It's a trap, he whispered. We were never meant to leave. We're part of it now. I stared at him, confused and horrified by his words. What do you mean, a trap? You're telling me we're stuck here. Stuck in this nightmare. He nodded slowly, his face ashen. This house doesn't just trap you physically. It traps you here, he said, tapping his temple. In your mind, it feeds on fear. It makes you see things that aren't real. It twists your thoughts until you can't tell what's real and what's not. The words echoed through me, but they made no sense. It felt like he was speaking in riddles, his face etched with an understanding that I could not grasp. What was he trying to say? I shook my head, backing away from him, my breath coming faster. No way, you're not making any sense. This thing, it's real. It's right outside. And you're telling me it's in my head. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, as though gathering himself. His next words were so soft, so filled with dread, that I could barely hear them over the pounding of my heart. You don't understand, he murmured. The house, it's feeding on our fear. The more we panic, the stronger it becomes. The more we try to leave, the more it traps us here. It doesn't want us to escape. It wants to consume us, Don. I took a step back, my pulse spiking. Consume us. What the hell are you talking about? But before he could respond, the unmistakable sound of something scraping against the door broke through the tension. It was faint at first, like nails dragging across wood, but it grew louder, more insistent, until the very air around us seemed to vibrate with the sound. The door shuddered violently, as though something on the other side was pushing against it, trying to break through. My body went cold, and I felt my legs buckle beneath me, a wave of dizziness crashing over me. It was like the house itself was reacting to the creature outside, and I realized, with growing horror, that Thomas wasn't just scared, he was right. This place was alive. The door rattled again, and this time, the sound was joined by the unmistakable creaking of wood from somewhere deeper in the house. It sounded like something was moving through the walls. Or was it inside of them? I pressed my back to the wall, clutching the knife in my hand, a useless comfort. I could barely breathe, barely think. As the reality of what Thomas was saying began to sink in, we weren't just trying to survive a creature. We were trying to survive something far worse, the house itself. It had been waiting for us, drawing us in, luring us with its secrets, with the promises of escape. But now, the true nature of the house was revealing itself in full. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was thick, suffocating, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. For us. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging their way down the hall toward us. I turned to Thomas, my voice rising in panic. "We have to get out. Now." But Thomas didn't respond. Instead, he turned, his gaze fixed on the dark corridor that stretched beyond the threshold of the room. There was something in his eyes now, something I had never seen before. A kind of resigned acceptance. It was like he had made his peace with whatever was coming. "Thomas," I whispered, my voice breaking. "What's wrong with you?" He didn't answer. He just stepped toward the hallway, his eyes locked onto the darkness ahead. I wanted to scream, to pull him away from whatever madness had claimed him, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen. The door burst open. The thing that emerged from the shadows was worse than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a man, or whatever it had once been. Its limbs were elongated, twisted in unnatural ways, skin stretched tight over an emaciated frame, eyes wide and empty, black as the void. But the worst part was its mouth, too wide, split in a grotesque, permanent grin, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. It stared at us, and I felt my mind break in that instant. The house, it was alive, and it was hungry. Before I could scream, it lunged. Time fractured into a blur of chaos. The creature, or whatever it had become, lunged at Thomas first, its limbs unnaturally fast, its mouth widening impossibly as it moved. The sound of its teeth snapping shut was deafening in the small room, like a trap springing too quickly. Thomas screamed, his voice high and ragged, but it was too late. It was on him before he could even react. I watched, paralyzed, as the thing ripped into him, its jagged teeth sinking into his flesh with sickening precision. His body went limp in an instant, as though every bit of fight had been drained from him the moment the creature's jaws made contact. The blood splattered across the floor, a dark, grotesque spray that seemed to settle into the very wood, as though it were part of the house, now part of whatever the hell this place was. But the terror didn't stop there. The creature, its body already impossibly long, began to twist and contort as it devoured Thomas. The sound of bone cracking and muscle tearing was all I could hear. I could feel my chest tightening, my mind screaming at me to run, to get out, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen in place, unable to look away from the horror unfolding before me. As it tore into Thomas's flesh, the house seemed to grow darker. The walls seemed to close in, their surfaces writhing, their shapes distorting, as if the house itself was feeding off of the terror in the air. The air grew thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the faint sound of whispers echoed in the back of my mind. Voices that were not my own, voices of those who had been here before, who had never left. A sudden, sharp noise broke through the madness, something behind me. A door, somewhere deep in the house, slammed open with a force that rattled the very foundation. I didn't have to look to know what it was. Whatever had been outside was now inside. The creature wasn't alone. Panic surged through me, breaking the trance, and I turned to flee, my heart hammering in my chest. But as I stumbled toward the hallway, I caught one last, horrifying glimpse of Thomas. His body, half consumed, lay limp on the floor, his eyes wide open, staring at me with an expression of helplessness and terror. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but no sound came. I didn't have time for grief. I didn't have time for anything. The house, it was alive. The walls seemed to stretch, their angles wrong, their corners twisting like a labyrinth that was closing in on me. The hallway stretched impossibly long before me, and every door I passed seemed to open on its own, inviting me to look into its endless blackness. The air grew thicker with each step, pressing in on me like the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. I couldn't hear the creature anymore, but I could feel its presence behind me, following me, stalking me through the house. My feet stumbled over the uneven floorboards, my breath shallow and erratic. Every step felt like it might be my last. I didn't know where I was going anymore. The house was twisting, changing its layout like it had a mind of its own, and the more I moved, the more it seemed to shift around me. I turned a corner and ended up back in the same room I had started in. Another corner, and I was standing in front of the same door, the one that had been slammed open just moments before. It was like the house was mocking me, toying with me, making sure I couldn't escape. The longer I stayed here, the more I realized that this was its game. The house was feeding off my fear, the same way it had fed off Thomas. It wanted me to break, to give in to the terror that was clawing at my mind. It wanted to consume me, too. I kept moving, hoping against hope that I would find an exit, some way out. But the longer I ran, the more the house felt like it was pressing in on me, like it was closing around me, trapping me in its walls. And then I heard the whispering again. Soft at first, like a distant hum in the back of my mind, but it grew louder with each step until it was all I could hear. The voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, whispered in an eerie chorus. Their words indistinct but their intent clear. They were beckoning me, urging me to stop, to listen, to give in. My legs felt like lead. I could barely move anymore. The weight of the voices was suffocating, pressing against my chest, making it harder to breathe. But then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a door stood ajar, faint light leaking from the crack. The door wasn't like the others. It was different, less twisted, less distorted, like it didn't belong to this house. I ran toward it, ignoring the pain in my legs, the exhaustion in my bones. Every step felt like it took everything I had left, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let it win. As I reached the door, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The house was fighting me, pulling at me, trying to drag me back. But I shoved the door open and stepped through, hoping, praying, that this would be my escape. And then I stopped. The room beyond was dark, too dark, but it wasn't like the rest of the house. It felt wrong. The air was heavier, thicker, like I was walking into a tomb. There was something in here, something waiting. I was too late. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, and the whispering stopped, but it was replaced by something worse. A low, guttural growl. It came from the darkness. And then I saw it. The creature loomed in the shadows, its form indistinct, a monstrous shape that seemed to ripple in the darkness like smoke. It was massive, far larger than any of the other things I'd seen in this house. Its body a twisted conglomeration of limbs, eyes, and jagged teeth. It had no face, no features that could be recognized, just an impression of something that shouldn't exist. Something that couldn't exist. I tried to back away, but the door behind me, the one I just passed through, had disappeared. It was as if the room itself had swallowed it whole, erasing any hope of escape. The air grew colder, a biting chill that froze my blood in my veins. My breath came in shallow, panicked gasps, my legs unsteady beneath me. And then it moved. Slow, deliberate, but with an unnatural grace that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The growl, deep and resonating, vibrated in the air around me, as though the very walls were trembling in response to its presence. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed faintly, two pinpricks of light in the blackness, watching me with a cold, calculating hunger. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest, but the creature didn't chase me. No, it didn't need to. It was far too confident in its control over this place. It was the house's true master, the one that had been waiting for me. In the dim light, I could see the grotesque details of its body, like something cobbled together from the nightmares of every victim who had wandered too far into this cursed home. It wasn't just its size that was terrifying. It was the way it moved, the way its body seemed to flicker and shift, as though it couldn't decide what form it should take. Its limbs stretched impossibly long, and its fingers were like knives, sharp and deadly. It was circling me now, its movements slow but deliberate. I could feel its gaze on me, even as it remained hidden in the shadows, watching me, savoring my fear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where could I go? The house was alive, a labyrinth that folded in on itself with each step I took. There was no escape, no exit. This was it. This was the end. I had to think. My mind raced, trying to piece together something, anything, that might help me survive. The house, the creature, there had to be something. But nothing made sense. There were no answers. No way out. The growl came again, deeper this time, a low rumble that reverberated through the room. It was closer now, much closer. The creature's form seemed to shimmer in the darkness as it lunged forward, faster than I could comprehend. I only had a split second to react. An instinct, a reflex born out of pure survival. I threw myself to the side, just as one of its elongated arms sliced through the air where I had been standing a moment before. The air itself seemed to scream with the force of its movement. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting up my spine, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I bolted, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that thing as I could. But the house was working against me. I turned a corner, my legs burning with the effort, and found myself facing another hallway. One I hadn't seen before, a hallway that stretched into infinite darkness. The walls seemed to press in, and I could hear the scratching sound, faint at first, but growing louder as the creature drew closer. Its footsteps were not like those of any normal animal. They were slow, deliberate, as if it were savoring the hunt. It wasn't just chasing me, it was toying with me. I reached for the first door I could find, flinging it open, and stepped inside without thinking. It was another dark room, but this one felt different. There was a sense of foreboding, a weight that pressed down on my chest, as though I was standing in the very heart of the house. I turned around to find the door had vanished behind me. I was trapped. The room was empty, no furniture, no windows, just 4 bare walls that seemed to close in with each breath I took. There was nothing in here to help me. No weapon, no escape, just the growing sound of the creature's presence, echoing through the room like a clock ticking down to my inevitable end. I didn't know how much time passed, but the longer I stood there, the more the air seemed to thicken, the more the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural life of their own. I felt eyes on me, though there was nothing to see. The silence was deafening, pressing in from all sides. And then, as if on cue, the whispers returned. Faint at first, barely audible, but growing louder, clearer. They were coming from every direction, filling my mind, pushing into my thoughts. They were calling my name, repeating it over and over again like a prayer, a chant. I clutched my head in my hands, trying to block them out, but it was useless. The words they spoke made no sense, a jumble of syllables that twisted and warped as they reached my ears. And then I heard it, a voice that stood out from the rest.
"Join us,"
it said, in a voice that was both soft and demanding. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The creature was near. I could feel it in my bones. I turned to the corner of the room, where the darkness seemed to swallow everything. There, just at the edge of my vision, I saw something move, a flicker, like a shadow passing too quickly. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The house had decided. The floor beneath me creaked as I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every instinct told me to run, but where could I go? The house had already taken everything. The door, the windows, the exits. I was trapped, and the whispers were growing louder, their voices merging into one endless cacophony that reverberated through the walls. "Join us," the voice had said, and I could still hear it echoing in my mind. The words felt like a command, an invitation to something I couldn't comprehend, something far darker than I had ever imagined. It was as though the house itself was alive, a living, breathing entity that wanted me to be a part of it, to become something I wasn't, something I couldn't understand. I forced myself to move, to think. There had to be something in this room, some way to fight back. But all I saw were the walls, plain, unadorned, and yet suffocating in their starkness. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, as though they had a life of their own. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something flicker. A door. It was small, hidden in the shadows, almost invisible. I blinked, unsure if I was seeing things, but there it was. A narrow wooden door, its edges worn and cracked, standing in stark contrast to the featureless walls around it. I didn't hesitate. Without thinking, I rushed toward it, my feet pounding against the wooden floor, my breath ragged in my chest. The door opened with a faint creak as I grabbed the handle. The chill of the air around me seeping through the crack. What lay beyond it was pitch black. The kind of darkness that felt suffocating, like it was waiting to swallow me whole. But there was no other choice. I stepped through. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I whirled around, heart racing, but there was no sign of the door. It had disappeared, just like the others. I was once again in a room, but this time it felt different. The room was larger, filled with an unsettling stillness. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with jars, strange, grotesque jars that seemed to pulse with a sickly glow. Each one contained something alive, or at least something that looked alive. I could see eyes blinking within some of them, others twisted and contorted in ways that defied logic. I felt a surge of nausea rise in my throat, but I couldn't look away. I had to know what I was dealing with. My feet carried me toward one of the shelves before I could stop myself. As I neared it, I reached out, my fingers brushing against one of the jars. The instant I touched it, a cold shock ran through my body. The jar vibrated, as though reacting to my touch, and I yanked my hand back in surprise. And then I heard it, a voice, soft, distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Don't touch them." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The voice was faint, but it was clear. It was a warning. The room was alive, just like the house, and it wanted me to stay away from whatever those jars contained. I turned around, scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shelves seemed to be watching me, as though waiting for me to make a mistake. The air grew thick, oppressive, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes on me. I was being watched. I wasn't alone. I took a step back, my gaze never leaving the shelves. When I heard it, the unmistakable sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, coming from the far corner of the room. It was low, guttural, like something was hiding just beyond the reach of the shadows, watching me. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively took a step toward the exit. But it was gone, just like everything else. The creature was close. "Join us," the voice whispered again, this time louder, more insistent, as though it were urging me to make a decision. But there was no decision to make. I couldn't join whatever this was. I couldn't become part of this nightmare. I turned back to the shelves, trying to find anything that could help me, anything to escape. And that's when I saw it, a small, almost unnoticeable door at the far side of the room, partially obscured by a pile of old, rotting books. It wasn't much, but it was something. I moved toward it, my feet heavy, every step feeling like it took an eternity. The air seemed to thicken with each passing second, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the creature was near. That growl was unmistakable. It was closing in. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling as I gripped it. For a moment, I thought I might be free, but that I had found a way out. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of something scraping across the floor behind me. I turned, panic surging through me as I saw the creature's shape emerge from the shadows. It was larger now, its body rippling and twisting like it was made of smoke and shadows. Its eyes, those glowing, piercing eyes, were fixed on me, and I knew with horrifying clarity that it wasn't just the house that wanted me. It was the creature, and it had been waiting. I yanked the door open, heart in my throat, and stumbled through, not daring to look back. I could hear it behind me, that growl growing louder, the sound of its claws scraping against the floor as it chased me. I had no idea where I was going, but I couldn't stop. I was running on instinct, my mind shutting down, focusing only on survival. The door slammed shut behind me, and I was in a new room, but this one felt different. It was smaller, the walls cracked and warped, the ceiling low and oppressive. And in the center of the room stood something that made my blood run cold. It was a mirror. But not a normal mirror. No, this one was alive. I could see shapes moving within it, distorted reflections of myself, twisted versions of who I was. I was staring at something that wasn't me, something other. And as I stared, the whispers began again. Join us. Forever. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, unable to look away. The reflection in the glass wasn't mine anymore. It was a grotesque mockery of my own face, twisted and distorted, like a nightmare that had taken root, and was now trying to claw its way into the real world. The eyes in the mirror glowed with an unnatural light, and my own, if it even was mine, seemed to blink and twitch of their own accord, as though they had a will separate from my own. The whispers, that same chilling voice, slithered around me like 1,000 invisible snakes, creeping into my thoughts, filling my head with a suffocating sense of dread. Join us. Forever. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs felt like they were made of stone, unmovable, locked in place as though the very air around me had solidified, trapping me. The mirror beckoned me, pulling me closer, inch by inch, despite my body's desperate protests. In the reflection, my twisted doppelganger stepped forward, as if to mirror my every move. I flinched, instinctively trying to back away, but the figure in the glass didn't follow. It stayed still, watching me, a sinister smile beginning to spread across its distorted face. The smile wasn't one of malice. It was something worse, something mocking, as though it knew something I didn't. Something that would soon be impossible to deny. My breath caught in my throat as I saw it move again. Not the mirror figure, but something behind it. A shadow, stretching long and unnaturally thin, emerging from the glass. It moved like liquid darkness, twisting and undulating, as though the very fabric of the mirror was alive, reaching for me. My heart pounded in my chest. It was coming. Whatever it was coming for me, and I didn't know how to escape it. The reflection of my face grinned wider, stretching impossibly, revealing rows of jagged teeth that shouldn't have been there. The sound of my own pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else as the shadow drew closer, its cold presence seeping through the edges of the mirror, the air growing frigid and heavy. I could feel it, the pull. It was as though the glass was not just a mirror anymore, but a doorway, an open portal to something far worse than I had ever imagined. I felt myself moving toward it, my feet taking slow, reluctant steps, as if my body had become a puppet, controlled by forces far beyond my understanding. No. I whispered to myself, the word barely escaping my throat. I won't. But I couldn't stop. My hand reached out toward the mirror, trembling as I felt the cold surface beneath my fingertips. The moment I touched it, the world around me shattered. The room, the air, everything twisted and warped, and I was falling into the glass, as if it was the very ground beneath me giving way. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness that engulfed me. The last thing I saw before I was consumed by the abyss was my own face, grinning back at me with that horrific, twisted smile. And then, there was nothing. I woke up in darkness. At first, I thought it was the same room, the same suffocating, oppressive air, but there was no mirror this time, no shelves, no jars. Just a thick, suffocating blackness that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. I couldn't move, couldn't feel anything, as if my very body had been erased. My mind was numb, floating in an endless void, disconnected from everything. And then I heard it. A voice. Soft at first, a whisper in the distance, just out of reach. Join us. The words seemed to surround me, echoing through the darkness, reverberating in my skull. They weren't like the whispers I'd heard before, though. These weren't words of invitation. No, these were commands, demands. The voice was insistent, powerful, as if it had no time for hesitation. It wanted something from me. It needed me. Join us. Forever. The coldness crept in again, wrapping around my heart like an icy vice. I didn't understand. I couldn't. What did it mean? What was this place? And why was I here? I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I could feel myself slipping, my consciousness fading like a distant memory. I was sinking into it, into whatever this was. But there was one thing I could still control. My thoughts. I clung to them with everything I had left, focusing on a single desperate thought. I won't join you. I won't be part of this. The voice seemed to laugh, a soft, mocking sound that reverberated through the void, and then it spoke again, its tone colder, darker than before. You have no choice. And with that, the darkness closed in. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the void. The world around me was blurry at first, as though I had been underwater. But slowly, the fog cleared, and I realized with growing horror that I was lying on the floor of the same house. The house that had swallowed me whole. But something was different now. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the air thicker, more oppressive, as if it was alive and breathing. The whispers were everywhere, louder now, filling the space with an unholy chorus of voices. I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning, my body aching as though I had been dragged through 1,000 nightmares. The house, it had changed me. It had claimed me. Join us, the voice whispered again. But this time, it wasn't just a suggestion. It was a command, a demand that I couldn't ignore. And as I stood there, trapped in this place, I realized something that chilled me to my core. I wasn't alone anymore. I had never been alone. And now, neither was it. I could feel it. Them. The presence in the house had changed. It was no longer just a distant, malevolent force lurking in the shadows. Now, it was inside of me, suffocating, pulsing through my veins like an insidious poison. I could hear them, the whispers, louder now, all around me, as if the very walls themselves were speaking. The house was alive. It had always been alive, and now it wanted me. I stumbled forward, my legs unsteady, as if I had just woken up from a long, deep sleep, but the weight pressing on my chest felt more like a prison. I couldn't breathe properly. The air was thick, heavy with an unseen force, and every breath seemed to draw me deeper into the web that had already begun to wrap around me. The walls pulsed, their surfaces rippling, shifting like liquid, as though the house itself was watching me, waiting for me to make a move. It felt as though the house had been waiting for this moment for years. No, longer than that. Longer than time itself. It knew I would come back. It knew I would return. I reached for the door, my hand trembling as I touched the cold, wooden surface. But before I could turn the handle, a sharp, deafening noise erupted from somewhere behind me. It sounded like a crash, like someone, had fallen to the floor. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling with panic, but the house only answered with silence. Then, the whispers returned, this time so close I could feel their breath on my neck. As though they were right behind me, their icy fingers brushing against my skin. I spun back to the door, desperate to escape, but my hand couldn't reach the handle. It was as though the door was moving away from me, sliding farther out of reach with every step I took. I tried again, this time pushing against the door with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the house was holding me in place, keeping me from leaving. And then I saw it. In the corner of my eye, something moved. A shadow, dark and unnatural, shifting against the flickering light of the overhead lamp. It was too quick, too fast to make out clearly, but there was no mistaking the shape. It was tall, taller than any human being had a right to be, and thin. Its limbs stretched out unnaturally long, like they didn't belong in the space they occupied. The whispers intensified, rising to a crescendo that drowned out every other sound. I could barely think anymore, my mind a whirl of chaos, but I knew one thing with certainty. It was coming for me. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, to get out, but the house seemed to close in on me, trapping me in this nightmare. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They were alive, bending and twisting, closing in around me as if they were suffocating me, pulling me into the very heart of the house. The shadow moved again, this time slower, more deliberate. It was coming closer, and I could see the glint of something in the darkness. Too many eyes, watching me, blinking in unison, their gaze piercing through the shadows like knives. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. They were frozen in place, as if the very air itself had become thick, as though I were trapped in quicksand. And then I heard it again. Join us. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was louder, more powerful, as if it was speaking directly into my mind. The words echoed in my skull, pounding against the walls of my thoughts. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head, trying to block it out. But the voice wouldn't stop. It didn't just ask anymore. It demanded. Join us, forever. The words, those terrible words, reverberated through the house, shaking the foundation beneath my feet. I opened my eyes again, the darkness before me deepening, and for a moment, I thought I saw the shadows shift. No, shape shift, twisting and changing as they reached toward me, their limbs extending, their forms blending together into something even worse. The air around me felt colder, heavier, until it was impossible to breathe. I was suffocating. The darkness seemed to swallow everything, until there was only one thing left, those eyes. The countless, unblinking eyes that stared at me from every corner, watching, waiting. The shadow was almost upon me now, its form towering above me, filling the room with its presence. It was so tall it scraped the ceiling, its limbs stretching out far beyond what was humanly possible. The eyes that stared at me blinked in unison, cold, calculating, as if they were judging me, trying to understand me. And then I heard it again, the voice. But this time it was inside my mind, burrowing deeper into my thoughts. You can't escape. You never could. A cold laugh echoed in the silence that followed. The shadow reached out, its hand impossibly long, its fingers curling into a claw, like shape. The air around me was thick with the stench of decay, of something long dead. Join us. The voice was everywhere, overwhelming me, consuming me. And as the shadow's hand reached for me, I realized one horrifying truth. I had already joined them. This house, it wasn't just a place. It was alive, a part of something far older, far darker than anything I had ever known. And now, it was too late to escape. I was part of it, and it was part of me. Forever. The walls seemed to contract around me, the air thickening with each breath I tried to take. My chest felt as though it were being crushed under an invisible weight, and the whispers were louder than ever, swirling in my ears like 1,000 voices fighting to be heard. But there was no escape, no way out. The shadow's hand, no, its claw, was still reaching for me. It was so close now that I could feel the cold emanating from it, seeping into my skin, chilling me to the bone. I tried to move, but my body was frozen, as if the very essence of the house had gripped me, holding me in place like a fly caught in a web. Please, I whispered, though I didn't know if I was speaking to the shadow or to the house itself. I don't want this. Let me go. But the house didn't answer. The shadows only grew, bending and writhing like living things. They encased me, and with them, the darkness descended further, deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The air tasted foul, like mold, decay, and something far worse, something ancient. The walls that once seemed so solid now felt like they were breathing, pulsing, as though they were drawing in my every breath, pulling me further into their grasp. The shadow loomed in front of me, and I realized it wasn't just one thing. It was a multitude. The arms that reached for me were no longer just arms. They were tendrils, hundreds of them, wrapping around me, pulling me into the very heart of the house. A scream rose in my throat, but I couldn't make a sound. My mouth opened, but nothing came out, not even air. It was as if the house had stolen my voice, my very soul. Every part of me was being drawn into the darkness, and I had no choice but to let it happen. The shadows were everywhere now, their forms shifting, turning into grotesque shapes that mocked the very idea of humanity. Faces, pale, contorted faces, emerged from the dark, their eyes hollow and lifeless. They reached out to me, their fingers curling around my skin like the hands of the dead, dragging me further into the abyss. Join us? The voice rasped again, this time deeper, more guttural, as though it were speaking from the bowels of the earth itself. You never left. You've always been here. You've always belonged to us. I couldn't see anything anymore. I was lost in the pitch, black void of the house. The shadows had consumed me, and now I was part of them. A part of this cursed, living thing that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to claim me. The walls seemed to close in even tighter, the air growing colder, suffocating me. The whispers were now a deafening roar in my mind, all of them speaking at once, overlapping, indistinguishable. Suddenly, I felt it, the touch of something on my shoulder, a cold, clammy hand. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind scrambling to understand what was happening. But before I could react, the hand gripped me, pulling me back. I gasped in horror, my breath catching in my throat as I was yanked away from the center of the shadows. I tried to scream, but once again, my voice betrayed me. The hands, the faces, the eyes, they all blurred together, a swirling mass of terror that dragged me into the depths of the house. And then, there was nothing. I opened my eyes, unsure of how much time had passed. I was back in the hallway, but everything had changed. The air was heavy, thick with an unnatural stillness. The walls, once so alive with movement, were now completely motionless. The house had returned to its silent, oppressive state, but something about it felt different. I felt different. My body was trembling uncontrollably, my heart still racing. I looked down at my hands, expecting to see the marks of the shadows, something to show where they had touched me, pulled me into the void. But there was nothing. My skin was clean, unmarked, as though nothing had happened at all. But deep within me I knew. I felt it. Something had changed. The house had changed me. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I wasn't just trapped in its walls. I was part of it. I could feel its pulse, its heartbeat, in my own chest. It was as if I had become an extension of the house itself, a new chapter in its dark history. And then, a terrible realization washed over me. I wasn't the first. Others had come before me. They had been drawn to the house, just like I was. Some had fought it, tried to leave, but it always brought them back. It always made sure they stayed. And now, I understood why. Because the house didn't just take people. It made them part of it. Its walls, its shadows, its very soul. It absorbed those who entered, pulling them into its depths, turning them into one with it. Forever. The door that had once been my only hope of escape now seemed insignificant. Useless. The house wasn't just a prison, it was a living thing, and I was its latest addition. I turned away from the door, my steps slow, deliberate, as if the house itself was guiding me. My body felt heavy, my mind foggy, but I couldn't resist. I didn't want to resist. Not anymore. The whispers were quiet now, softer, but still there, like a distant hum in the back of my mind. I could feel them watching, waiting for the moment when I would finally accept my place in their endless, cursed existence. I had joined them. and there was no leaving. Not ever. The darkness around me pressed in, thick and suffocating, as if it were no longer just part of the house, but a part of me too. The walls that had once seemed so oppressive now felt familiar, like an old coat I had worn for far too long. The air was cold, but it wasn't just the temperature. It was the absence of warmth, the loss of comfort, of humanity. It was a void, a place where everything I had been was being erased, replaced by something darker, something far more ancient than I could comprehend. I stumbled forward, my steps slow and heavy, my mind still trying to process what had just happened. I had been consumed by the house. I had joined it, become one with it, as the voice had said. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something even worse lurking within these walls. The whispers were louder now, clearer. They were no longer just distant sounds. They were voices, each one distinct, each one filled with despair, pain, and recognition. I could hear them now, like 1,000 forgotten souls calling out to me, speaking in tongues that I couldn't understand. But I knew one thing: they wanted me to join them. Come closer, a voice whispered, but it wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a command, one that echoed in my mind like a drum bit, shaking me to my core. You belong with us. I tried to resist, to move away, but my feet refused to obey. They carried me forward, deeper into the house, as though the very structure was pulling me in, guiding me to some unseen destination. The hallway stretched out before me, impossibly long, the light from the flickering bulbs casting strange shadows along the walls. The house seemed alive, its very architecture shifting, groaning, as if it were breathing with me, responding to my presence. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the weight of the house itself were pressing down on me, forcing me to move forward. I reached a door at the end of the hallway. It was old, its wood darkened with age and neglect, the edges cracked and warped, as though it had been waiting here for centuries. Something about it drew me in, a pull so strong that I didn't even question it. I reached for the doorknob, my fingers trembling as I grasped it. And then I heard it. The voice. It was louder this time, almost deafening, filling every inch of my mind. You don't want to go in there. It warned, its tone soft but insistent. Not yet. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I wanted to pull away, to turn around and leave, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. It was as though the house had ensnared me completely, wrapped me in its grasp until I was nothing more than a puppet, my strings pulled by forces beyond my understanding. I hesitated for just a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, without thinking, I twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The room inside was dark, the only light coming from a small, flickering candle on the floor in the center of the room. The walls were lined with strange symbols, carved into the wood, their meanings lost to time. The air smelled of damp earth and something more. Something I couldn't quite place. It made my skin crawl. I stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath me, and as soon as I did, the door slammed shut behind me with a force that made the room shake. My heart leaped in my chest, and I spun around, trying the handle, but it was no use. The door wouldn't budge. Panic rose within me, but then a voice, a new voice, spoke. Welcome. I turned to face the source of the voice, but there was no one there. The room was empty, save for the candle and the strange symbols on the walls. Yet, I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Someone was watching me. Who are you? I whispered, my voice trembling in the silence. What do you want from me? The voice chuckled, a low, rasping sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. We don't want anything from you, it said. We simply want you to remember. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the walls. The symbols dancing before my eyes as though they were alive, shifting and writhing like snakes. I stepped closer to the candle, my eyes drawn to the flame as it flickered and danced, casting strange shadows on the walls. Remember what? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The voice grew louder, more insistent, as though it were speaking directly into my mind. Remember how you got here, it said. Remember the choice you made. I recoiled, my mind spinning. The choice. What choice? I hadn't made any choice, had I? The memories were fractured, slipping through my fingers like sand. I couldn't focus on them, couldn't grasp them. Everything felt wrong, out of place. And then, suddenly, it hit me. The reason I was here. The reason I had been drawn to this place. The house. It wasn't just a building. It wasn't just a place of horror and darkness. It was a trap. A trap for the lost. For those who couldn't remember, who had forgotten their past, their choices. It fed on their confusion, their desperation. It took those who didn't belong, who were searching for something, anything, and it gave them what they wanted, only to trap them forever. I had been searching for something. I had come here to escape, to find peace. But I hadn't found peace. I had found only this. The house didn't want me to escape. It wanted me to stay, to become a part of it, to be forgotten like all the others. I turned away from the candle, my mind racing. The walls felt closer now, the air thicker. The symbols seemed to move, to stretch toward me like hungry hands. And then I saw it. At the far end of the room, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, its features hidden from view. You finally remembered, the voice said, this time with a hint of satisfaction. But it's too late. The figure stepped forward, and I realized, with a shock that sent ice through my veins, that it wasn't just a figure. It was me. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure moved forward, its silhouette growing clearer, and with each step it took, a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just the shadow of someone who had come before me. It was me. The face was mine. Distorted, twisted, like a mirror held up to an impossible version of myself. The features were there, but they were stretched and contorted in unnatural ways, as if they were the reflection of a dream gone wrong. Its eyes, my eyes, were empty black pools, devoid of everything that once made me human. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My legs felt like they were made of lead, my body frozen in place by the sheer horror of what I was seeing. The figure took another step forward, and as it did, the room seemed to shift. The walls closed in tighter. The air grew colder, and the shadows danced, warping into grotesque shapes. It was like the room was alive, its pulse synchronized with mine, echoing with a sense of inevitable doom. You're not going to escape this time. The figure, I, said, its voice a distorted echo of my own. It was like hearing the voice of a stranger in my own head, but it felt so familiar. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but I couldn't find the words. My mind was clouded, and the weight of the moment was crushing me, as if the very essence of my being was being siphoned away by the presence before me. The figure stepped into the light, and for a brief moment, I saw something in its hand. A dark, twisted object, a relic of some forgotten time. The longer I stared at it, the more I felt its pull. Like it was calling to me, beckoning me to come closer. What is that? I managed to croak, my voice raw and barely audible. The figure smiled, a grin that was my own, but it was wide and jagged, too wide for a normal human mouth. You've seen it before, it said, the words dripping with malice. You just don't remember. I felt a tremor in my chest, a memory stirring beneath the surface, just out of reach. It was there, in the darkest corner of my mind, a recollection that made my skin crawl. But the more I tried to grasp it, the further it slipped away. I reached out, desperate to hold on to that fleeting memory. But before I could, the figure raised the object in its hand, and the air around me thickened, as though I were drowning in a sea of darkness. The object, it wasn't just a relic. It was an anchor, a symbol of something ancient, something that had been here long before I ever set foot in this cursed house. It was the key. The tether that held everything together, that bound the house to me and I to it. You were always meant to be here? The figure continued, its voice colder now, final. The house. It doesn't just take. It remembers. It remembers the ones who walked away, the ones who left behind their past. You thought you were free, but you were always part of this place. Just like me. I shook my head, panic rising in my chest. No, I gasped. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose you. But as I said the words, I realized something. The truth was right in front of me, hanging like a heavy curtain I couldn't push aside. The house, this house, wasn't just a place of evil. It was a mirror, a reflection of the deepest parts of my soul, the part of me that was lost, the part that wanted to escape everything I had run from. The figure smirked, its eyes gleaming with a wicked satisfaction. You never had a choice. It was always going to be you. I felt a coldness grip my heart, as though my very essence was being torn from me. The figure wasn't just a ghost of what I could have been. It was me, the version of me that had never left, the part that had stayed behind in the darkness. It was the part that had never escaped the house. Suddenly, the walls of the room seemed to ripple, the symbols on them glowing faintly, as if they were reacting to the presence of the figure. The air thickened, and the room seemed to pulse, the house itself alive with malevolent energy. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was frozen, unable to tear my gaze away from the figure that stood before me, its twisted smile widening. You think you're different from me? The figure sneered. You think you can leave this place and still be whole? You can't. We're the same. We've always been the same. The room seemed to shift once again, and the ground beneath me cracked open, a deep black chasm yawning wide, pulling at the very fabric of reality. I could feel the house closing in, tightening its grip on me, suffocating me with its presence. And then the figure stepped forward. Its hand reached out, long, skeletal fingers brushing against my face, and as they touched me, I felt everything, every choice, every regret, every moment I had tried to forget, flood into me in a rush, like drowning in my own memories. You've always belonged here? It whispered, its voice a cold echo in my mind. You always will. And as the darkness consumed me, I realized the truth. There was no escaping. There had never been. The house wasn't just a place. It was a prison for the soul, and I had been its prisoner from the moment I walked through its doors. I was the house. The darkness enveloped me, swallowing me whole, as if the very air around me had turned to liquid. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every ounce of my being seemed to be consumed by the oppressive weight of the house, pulling me into the abyss of its twisted, suffocating grip. And yet, through the suffocating blackness, I felt something stir deep within me. A faint flicker of warmth, a pulse of light. It wasn't much, just a whisper of something, like a heartbeat in the distance. But it was enough to remind me that I wasn't completely lost. My body trembled, and for the first time since I had entered the house, I felt the faintest spark of defiance. I wasn't ready to let go. I wasn't ready to disappear into this nightmare without a fight. The figure, the twisted version of myself, hovered in front of me, its smile stretching wider with every passing second, like it was savoring the moment. It had me. It knew it. The house knew it. But still, that faint spark of resistance burned brighter. Why do you fight it? The figure asked, its voice dripping with disdain. You are this place. You always have been. You belong here. I shook my head, forcing my voice to work, to push through the darkness. No, I don't belong to you. I don't belong to this place. The figure's grin faltered for a moment, and it took a step back, its head tilting, as if it had never considered that possibility. You think you can change that? You think you can escape what you are? I drew in a shaky breath, focusing on the faint light that still lingered within me, despite everything the house had done to me. I'm not you, and I'm not the house. The figure laughed, the sound low and mocking. You're wrong. You're exactly like me. We were both trapped here long before you even stepped foot in this place. No, I whispered fiercely, feeling my strength grow despite the overwhelming sense of dread. I wasn't trapped. I chose to leave. For the briefest of moments, the figure's smile flickered, and I saw something else in its eyes. Doubt. Fear. As if it hadn't anticipated my response. It took another step back, a deep, unsettling silence settling between us. You think you can escape your past. The figure muttered, its voice now tinged with something far darker. But the house never forgets. The past never forgets. I didn't know how I knew it, but I did. That flicker of light within me, this pulse of resistance, it wasn't just my defiance. It was my choice. It was my memory, my will to fight back, the thing that had always made me different from the creature in front of me. It wasn't the house that held me here. It was my own fear, and fear could be conquered. The walls of the room began to shift again, the oppressive darkness wreathing, the air thickening. I could feel the pressure building. Like the house was about to collapse in on itself. The figure was closing in, and I knew it could destroy me with a thought. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. I remember now, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in what felt like forever. I remember who I am, and I'm not you, and I'm not the house. The figure's eyes narrowed, its face twisting in anger. You can't fight it. You're part of me. You are me. No, I said louder now, my voice gaining strength. I'm me, and I'll leave this place. I'll leave you behind. The ground beneath me trembled as I took a step forward. The figure recoiled, its twisted form flickering like a faulty reflection in water. The walls seemed to pulse, the house itself alive with rage, trying to pull me back into its grip. But I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I chose to fight. I pushed forward, and the darkness recoiled. The figure screamed, a horrifying, shrieking wail that echoed through the very bones of the house. But I didn't stop. I kept moving, stepping through the choking darkness, leaving the twisted reflection of myself behind. The light within me, faint as it was enough to cut through the suffocating shadows, enough to break free from the grip the house had on me. I could feel it now. The weight lifting, the crushing pressure easing as I took each step. The house was trying to fight back, but it was losing. The more I moved, the weaker its grasp became. And then, in a final surge of determination, I broke free. The darkness shattered around me like fragile glass, and I found myself standing in the middle of the room, no longer weighed down by the oppressive air. The figure was gone, dissolved into nothingness, and the house, though still there, no longer held the same grip on me. I took a deep breath, and the air felt fresher, lighter. I wasn't free yet, but I was closer. I could feel it. And I wasn't going to stop until I was completely free. The house had tried to claim me, but it hadn't succeeded. Not yet. Not ever. But as I made my way toward the door, I felt a flicker of doubt, a thought I couldn't shake. Something was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, a whisper that told me the fight wasn't over. And as I reached the door, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, carrying with it the faintest echo of the figure's voice. It's never over. I froze, my hand on the door handle. And for the first time in a long time, I realized the truth. The house didn't just claim the lost. It claimed the never free. I wasn't safe yet. Not by a long shot. I stood there, my hand still gripping the door handle, my heart racing, every nerve in my body on high alert. The whisper still echoed in my ears, the haunting reminder that the house was never truly done with me. The thought of stepping through the door now seemed impossible, as if the world beyond it had turned into a vast, unknown void. It's never over. The words crawled under my skin like 1,000 tiny insects, burrowing into my thoughts. I knew the figure, or whatever it was right in some twisted sense. The house wasn't just a physical structure, it was an entity, a part of me now. And though I had pushed past it, I could feel its presence lingering, like a shadow that wouldn't release its grip. But what choice did I have? If I stayed here, I'd be consumed by the same darkness that had almost destroyed me. If I walked through that door, I had a chance to fight back, a chance to leave it behind. But was I leaving it behind? My fingers tightened around the handle, and I could feel the weight of that decision pressing down on me. The house had given me a taste of what it could do. It had twisted me, had turned me into something I didn't recognize. What if I hadn't truly escaped it? What if it followed me, waiting to latch on once I stepped outside? I could feel my breath quickening, a cold sweat forming on my brow. The room seemed to close in around me again, the air thick and stifling, and in the corner of my eye I could see it, just the faintest flicker of movement. A shadow, stretching across the far wall, like it was waiting for me to turn around to acknowledge its presence. I didn't dare move, but the flicker grew. The shadow twisted and contorted, taking on a shape. No, not a shape, a form. The form of the figure. The twisted reflection that had tormented me, the one that had claimed to be a part of me. And now it was back. I could hear its voice again, low and mocking, yet laced with a darker edge. You can't escape, not from what you've become. My stomach churned, the words sinking in deeper than I wanted them to. I'm not you, I whispered through gritted teeth, trying to convince myself as much as it. But the figure just laughed, that same chilling, guttural sound that made my blood run cold. You are me. You always have been. The house saw to that. The words hit me harder than any of the other threats, because this time I could see it. The shadow in the corner, flickering and shifting, seemed to take on my own form, my own features, twisted into something I no longer recognized. The more I stared, the more I began to feel the same pull, the same suffocating dread that had overtaken me earlier. It was like being trapped in a mirror, staring at my reflection as it distorted and warped. The image no longer something I could call my own. You were nothing before the house. The figure taunted, its voice now mingling with the oppressive silence of the room. And you'll be nothing when it's done with you. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to pulse with life, as though the house was breathing, suffocating. The air thickening until it was almost impossible to draw breath. I couldn't let it win. I couldn't let it define me. Get out of my head. I spat, my voice shaking with a force I hadn't known I had left. I'm not you. I'm not this place. The figure's grin stretched even wider, its face becoming grotesque, an exaggerated mockery of itself. You're lying to yourself. You can't escape what you are. I clenched my fists, the skin of my palms pulling tight as I summoned every ounce of strength I had left. My breath came in ragged gasps, and with every exhale, I could feel the pull of the house grow weaker, the shadow in the corner of my vision fading. I choose who I am, I said through gritted teeth. I choose to leave. With that, I flung the door open, feeling the burst of cold air hit my face as it swung wide. A wave of relief washed over me, mingled with the raw sensation of freedom, of stepping away from the grip the house had had on me. But the darkness did not follow. For the first time, there was no voice, no shadow at my heels. The house stood still, silent, as though it were holding its breath. I took a step forward. Then another, and another. Each one felt like a victory. Each one brought me closer to the freedom I so desperately wanted. But in the back of my mind, I could still hear it. That whisper. That thing that told me it wasn't over. It's never over. I tried to shake it off, to dismiss it, but I couldn't help the unease that crept back in. I had made it out of the house. Physically, at least. But I wasn't so sure it would let me go so easily. It had claimed so much of me already. Could I really walk away unscathed? I took another step, and then another. But as I moved, something strange began to happen. The cold air around me seemed to shift, as though something was changing in the environment. The light that had once seemed to comfort me now felt distant, out of reach. The wind, once refreshing, now carried a strange weight. The world beyond the door, once a symbol of freedom, suddenly seemed alien. I stopped dead in my tracks. The door slammed shut behind me, and the sound was not the wind. It was the house, closing in again. The door's sudden slam echoed through the space around me, reverberating in my bones. I spun around, panic rising in my chest, but the door was already gone. There was no door anymore, no frame, just the bare, cracked walls of a hallway that stretched on infinitely in both directions. The floor beneath me was cold and uneven, like the house was shifting once more, molding itself around me. I felt the sweat on the back of my neck, a cold trickle of fear running down my spine. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had stepped out, I had left, I had escaped. But the truth was more sinister, more suffocating. The house never lets go. My heart thudded in my chest as I turned in a slow circle, my mind trying to make sense of the impossible. The walls seemed to close in on me, but the hallway was still endless, stretching farther than I could possibly see. The whispers were back, like 1,000 voices murmuring from the walls, all of them laced with a cold, mocking laughter. I had thought I was free. I had wanted to believe that leaving would mean leaving it all behind. But now, it felt like the walls were alive, like they were aware of me, watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. There was only one direction to go. Forward. I forced my legs to move, willing myself to ignore the creeping dread that clawed at my chest. But the further I went, the more the house seemed to shift. The shadows lengthened, twisting unnaturally around me, and the air grew colder with every step. It was like the very house itself was breathing, inhaling and exhaling with an eerie rhythm that matched the frantic beat of my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led somewhere, guided almost. But guided where? To what? I felt the undeniable pull of something ahead, something that didn't belong. A part of the house I hadn't seen before. At the end of the hallway, a door materialized. This one was different, darker, with carvings on the wood that twisted into shapes I couldn't comprehend, patterns that shifted when I tried to focus on them. The edges of the door seemed to ripple like water, as though it wasn't a door at all, but a portal into something else entirely. I couldn't help myself. I walked toward it, my hand reaching for the handle. As my fingers brushed against the cool wood, a jolt of electricity shot up my arm, and I jerked back instinctively. The sensation lingered, a static charge buzzing under my skin. The door creaked open on its own, as if it had been expecting me, and the darkness beyond it seemed to pull at me, as though it were calling me into its depths. My throat tightened. My body screamed for me to turn and run, but I couldn't. I had come this far, and besides, I knew what was on the other side. I had already been here. I had already seen it. I stepped through the door. Immediately, the temperature dropped. My breath fogged in the air in front of me, and the walls around me seemed to close in tighter. The room was smaller than I had expected, barely large enough for me to move, and yet it stretched on endlessly in my mind. The walls were covered in blackened, decaying wood, like the house had been abandoned for years, or maybe centuries. But the worst part wasn't the decaying walls or the oppressive air. It was the sound, the low, rhythmic thudding coming from somewhere just beyond the reach of my senses. Like something was alive in the dark, something breathing, something waiting. I stepped further into the room, the sound growing louder with each passing moment, until it was all I could hear. The walls seemed to pulse with the noise, as if the entire house was alive, moving in tune with the beat of whatever dark entity lurked just beyond my sight. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, half hidden in the shadows, was a figure. Not a shadow this time, No, this was solid, formed, a shape that was unmistakably human. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized it was me. The figure stood perfectly still, its back to me, but the resemblance was undeniable. Same height, same build, same hair, same clothes. It was me, and yet it wasn't. This was wrong. I felt the panic rise in my throat, but my body refused to move, frozen by the eerie, unnatural sight before me. It was a reflection, but it was twisted. I could see my own eyes, wide and hollow, staring back at me from the figure's face. I saw myself, but something was missing. There was a hollow emptiness in its gaze, a vacancy where life should have been. And then it turned. I staggered back, a scream caught in my throat, but I couldn't make a sound. The figure's face was distorted, its smile stretched unnaturally wide, the edges of its mouth curling up in a grotesque mockery of a grin. But it wasn't just its face, it was the whole thing. The way it moved, the way it stared, and in its eyes, I saw it. The house. The same darkness, the same cold, the same suffocating pull that had followed me, that had twisted me into something I no longer recognized. The house hadn't just shaped me physically, it had consumed me. You never left. The figure whispered in my voice, the words barely audible, yet echoing in the corners of my mind like a curse. You've always been here. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I stumbled back again, my heart racing. No, I gasped. No, this isn't real. This isn't me. But the figure stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it was being pulled by strings. You can't escape what you've become. It hissed, its voice like the grinding of metal against stone. And you're part of the house now, and you'll never leave. I couldn't breathe. It was true, wasn't it? The house had twisted me, had claimed me, had made me one of its own. The reflection in front of me wasn't just a vision of what I feared, it was the truth. I had become part of the darkness, and now the house was ready to take me back. I backed away, but the walls were closing in. The space was shrinking. I was trapped, and the figure kept coming, its twisted grin widening with every step. I tried to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. It was too late. The house had me. I woke up to darkness. At first, I thought it was just another nightmare, that the house was still playing its sick game with me. But the silence was different. It was deeper, more suffocating than anything I'd felt before. The weight of it pressed down on me, a crushing force that made it impossible to move, to breathe. I tried to blink, but my eyes felt heavy. Slowly, painfully, I forced them open, only to be met with an empty void. No walls, no ceilings, no floors. Just an infinite nothingness that stretched out in every direction. It wasn't dark in the usual sense. It was a lack of light, like everything had been swallowed whole. My body felt like it was floating, weightless. I tried to reach out, but my hands didn't respond. I couldn't feel anything at all. Panic surged through me, but it was hollow. Even my fear felt distant, disconnected, like I wasn't entirely myself. Was this it? For a moment, I thought I might be dead, trapped in some kind of limbo. But the more I tried to focus, the more I realized I could still hear something. Soft whispers. Low and unintelligible, they came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Like the house was speaking to me, even now, even here, in this emptiness. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the distance. It wasn't much, just a faint pinprick of light that flickered like a candle in the wind. But it was something. It was hope. I reached toward it, but my body still refused to move. The distance between me and the light seemed to stretch further the more I tried. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't feel my arms. Yet I was aware of the deep, knowing ache in my chest. The coldness that seemed to come from within, a hollow sensation that had lodged itself deep inside my bones. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. You're still here. It never ends. You're part of it now. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, as though the very act of calling for help had been drained from me. The light, small and faint, grew larger as I concentrated on it, but it felt wrong. The closer I got, the more it twisted, bending in unnatural ways. It was no longer a comforting glow. It was a trap, a lure. I couldn't stop myself. The whispers surrounded me, now unmistakable. They were my own voice, my own fears, my own thoughts, all twisted and contorted, mocking me. You'll never leave. You'll never be free. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to listen. I shut my eyes tightly as though closing them would shut out the voices, would shut out everything. When I opened them again, I was back. But it wasn't the house I recognized. The walls around me were blackened, charred like they had been burned into nothingness. The floor beneath my feet was cracked and broken. The remnants of a foundation that had crumbled away. The air was thick with the scent of decay, like something old and forgotten had been left to rot in the dark. I could hear the soft thudding again, the rhythmic noise that had followed me all this time. It was closer now. I could feel it in my bones, vibrating through the floor, through my very skin. And then I saw it. The figure stood at the far end of the room. It was tall, far too tall, its outline barely visible in the shadows. But it was there, and I knew it. It was me. Or at least, it had been. The figure's face was blank, devoid of emotion, but it didn't matter. I could feel its eyes on me. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, like it was reading my soul. It was as if it knew every part of me. The darkest parts, the parts I'd tried to forget, the parts that had always been there. I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't. I couldn't escape. It raised one hand slowly, its fingers long and twisted, as if they weren't meant to bend that way. The same hand that had been me. The same hand that had tried to hold on to something, anything, to stop the spiral. But there was nothing left to hold on to. The figure spoke then, its voice an echo of my own, distorted and hollow. You think you can leave? It asked, its voice a mockery of my deepest fears. You think you can escape it? Escape me? I wanted to scream, but there was no sound. You've been here all along, it whispered, its voice cold, like the touch of death itself. You never left. You never will. The room began to shake. The walls trembled as the figure advanced toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. The thudding grew louder, a heartbeat I could feel in every inch of my body, thumping like a drum of doom. I didn't know if I could take it any longer. The figure reached out, its hand closing around my wrist, with a force that sent shockwaves through me. I gasped, but there was no air in my lungs, no way to breathe. I could feel myself being pulled forward, pulled into the very essence of the thing that had haunted me, consumed me, broken me. And then, everything went dark. The house had won.